Welcome back everyone to a video, and today we are ranking every single defense headed in to the 2024 NFL season. Now, if you are new to the channel or you just haven't seen one of my rankings in a long time, this is probably going to be my one and only defensive ranking. I might do this video again after training camp, or I guess during training camp. But for right now, at least how I have it planned out, this will be like my only video doing this. Might do it again later, but again, probably the final one. Comment down below any teams you agree or disagree with. And also, if you guys are new, be sure to subscribe to the channel on the road to 1,000 subscribers. I would appreciate all the support there. There's always NFL content on this channel. And I will also be doing a ton of College Football 25 videos on my second channel, which is linked in the description. So go check that out too if you like that. But for right now, is the defensive rankings. And we're just going to jump right into it now. Okay, real quick, before we jump right into it, we do have S, A, B, C, and D for tiers today. I always try and not put as many teams as possible in the D tier. That's like where I see it just being really, really bad. So again, we'll see who lands in there for this video. But now jumping right into it is the Bengals first. And I think, you know, the Bengals defense, I think a couple of seasons ago was really, really good. I do think it's a bit worse now. I think there's still some guys that are relatively, I don't want to say like unknown, but I think they're kind of like some unsung heroes that are actually quite good, namely being Cameron Taylor-Britt, who, like, you know, is honestly a pretty good corner. I'd say one of the more underrated corners in the league at his age, and he still has time to develop. So, you know, him taking another step, that could be big for the Bengals. You still got Mike Hilton, that D-line, Hendrickson. Even though he did request a trade, he is still there. So you have him, you have Sam Hubbard. You lose DJ Reader, which is a really big loss. He was a huge run stopper for you. So again, another big thing too, Dax Hill switching from safety to corner. That's always a bit questionable too. So the Bengals defense, I'm not going to say is going to be really, really good. I don't think it's going to be bad and be like a liability for them. But I think they're going to have their fair share of games where they will be exposed to at least some degree, especially in the secondary. That D-line could actually be pretty good despite losing Reader. But secondary scares me a little bit. They're going to go B tier. I don't think they're bad. You could probably put them A tier as well, and I could see that. But I'm going to have them B tier for right now. Next are the Jaguars. Jaguars were interesting. So their biggest signing probably was getting Eric Armstead from the 49ers. And they were honestly kind of a dark horse team to land him in general. I can't remember where he was like rumored to go, but it was not the Jaguars. They really kind of came out of nowhere and signed him. That was a huge signing for him. So you have him. You now have Trevon Walker going to his third year, who probably hasn't been as productive as you would have liked through 2 years, but the last season was definitely a step up. So again, big third year for him. We'll see how he does. The secondary, I wouldn't say is weak, but I wouldn't say it's great either. You have Ronald Darby back there now, so that's not a terrible signing, and Darnell Savage too. So you have, like, you know, respectable players. Andre Cisco is still back there too. I'm not going to say that, again, kind of similar to the Bengals. They're probably going to have their fair share of games where they're going to struggle a bit, but overall, I think they're a solid defense. They're going to go B tier as well. Next is the Colts, and the Colts are a really tough one for me because you have guys like Shaq Leonard, who in years past have been very, very good. But, you know, recently, some of those names we're used to seeing up there really aren't there anymore. It's kind of like almost like a new era, I guess, for the Colts in a lot of ways, especially on offense. But defense, I think it's the same can be said. For me personally, I'm the most excited to see Laiatu Latu, the rookie they drafted for defensive end play. He was one of like my favorite edge rushers in this past NFL draft. So I was, you know, very excited they got him where they did. I believe he was the first defensive player off the board this past year. So anyway, for the Colts though, I think they still have playmakers. I don't think they're going to be weak. But again, and I didn't do this on purpose, but I also see them being B tier as well. They have Juju Brents now in his second year, back and healthy. I believe he missed 8 games last year. So hopefully we can have that corner back, and maybe he takes a big step this season. But overall, for me, I'm really excited for Laiatu Latu. And again, not a bad defense, but again, nothing to really write home about either. I promise this is the last B tier team we'll get in a row. I might have to mix these up a little bit because I did not mean for that to happen. I just scrambled these up real quick. But yeah, Buccaneers I also have being B tier. I did do a video going over the entire NFC South and AFC South now. So if you're interested, go check those videos out. It was pretty in-depth for each team. Each team probably had like a 15 to 20 minute segment. Each video is about an hour long. So go check that out. But for the Buccaneers, I do think their defense is still going to be pretty decent. Like, you have, you know, Vita Vea still there, and you have Kalijah Cansey, I believe is his name, and now in his second year, he looked to be actually pretty good in his first year, so, you know, another year of development there. I like the Buccaneers defense. I don't think this is, again, like it was a few seasons ago. I think it's regressed a bit since then, but I think it's still you can trot them out there and not be like too afraid. But again, like I said, for these other teams now, they'll probably have their fair share of games to where like they're probably going to struggle. I mixed it up a little bit more, and now next is the Ravens. They're going S tier. It feels like the Ravens always have one of the better defenses in the entire NFL. You lose Patrick Queen and Geno Stone in free agency, and Jadeveon Clowney, but I think despite that, you still have Roquan Smith. You still have Kyle Hamilton, one of the best young safeties in the entire NFL back there. So I like the Ravens defense a lot. I still see them being one of the best in the league. They're going S tier, really the top of the league there, in my opinion. Next is the Seahawks. The Seahawks are going to go B tier. I do think they're a very solid defense. I wouldn't say they are like, again, like every team in there, super good. Although I will say I think they have one of the higher ceilings out of the teams in the B tier that we've covered so far. You have Devin Witherspoon now in year 2. He had a great rookie year. I was wrong about him. I wasn't like, I didn't think he was a bad player. I thought it was a bit of an interesting pick at the time because Jalen Carter was on the board, which I think would have been a great pick as well. But Witherspoon had a great year, and so you still have him. You have Tariq Woolen back there. You reassigned Leonard Williams for D-line. I think the Seahawks have a very solid defense that can have, again, a bit of a higher ceiling than a team like, I would say, the Jaguars or the Buccaneers. Well, probably the Colts too, though. Next is Washington. Washington's going to go C tier, but I will say, hear me out on one thing, though, for Washington. I'm sure Washington fans are not thrilled to hear this. But first off, on paper, you're just not quite there yet to compete with some of the better teams, at least in my opinion. In my opinion, for them, this year is all about Jaden Daniels. You got to see what you have in him going forward. Defensively, though, as a huge Panthers fan, I'm very familiar with a lot of Panthers players, obviously, and the Washington Commanders did sign both Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin to their defense. And Jeremy Chin's a bit of a boomer bust pick for them, in my opinion. Like, he could be really good, he could just not. He had a great rookie year, then kind of regressed after that, wasn't used properly, that kind of thing. But Frankie Louvu is someone that he can fly all over the field. He can rack up tackles for loss. He can pressure the quarterback. He can do a lot of things well. And now he gets to play in Dan Quinn's defense. So that's actually a really good signing. I like that a lot for Washington. You have Emmanuel Forbes now in his second year, which would be very interesting. You have Bobby Wagner for what it's worth. Obviously, he's not the youngest in the world anymore. So again, you still have some bigger names there. A lot of them I don't think really jump off the page or will be enough to compete with some of the better offenses. You're going to struggle, but I do think Dan Quinn's scheme can definitely help set up some of those guys to be in some positions to make plays. I think at a certain point, though, the lack of talent will catch up to them. But again, still some young guys on there to be excited about, like Emmanuel Forbes. So it's still worth watching. Next is the Dolphins. The Dolphins could probably go B tier or A tier. I'm going to put them A tier. At the end of the video, I may move some teams around that I feel like I should have been, higher on or lower than. I try and always keep it like relatively fluid. As far as like ranking them, I don't want to spend too much time on one team. So at the end, if I feel like I've ranked someone too low, I'll move them up or vice versa. But again, Dolphins are going A tier. Unfortunately, you lost, I think, Jalen Phillips at the end of last year with that Achilles tear, so that really sucks. I think you also lost Andrew Van Ginkel in free agency, if I'm not mistaken, and you also lost Christian Wilkins. So you definitely lost some names there. You still have Jalen Ramsey, though, and that's someone that, in my opinion, still has some great football left in him. And the Dolphins' defense, I think, has been very solid. I do think it depends a lot on how they approach the players, how they approach the spots in that defense after the big losses like Christian Wilkins. Like, that D-line was honestly really good, but by the playoffs, they lost a lot of guys to injuries. So, again, you got Bradley Chubb there. I think your defense will compete. Maybe they're more B tier. I might move them down later, but they're just going to stay A tier for right now. I think they're a great defense still, but definitely not what they probably could have been had everyone stayed healthy last year or been re-signed for this year. Next is the Texans. The Texans are definitely going A tier. They're going A tier, though. They have some great young players on that team. Again, I just covered them in my AFC South video. Derek Stingley, now in year 3. Again, the first year, he wasn't really used properly. He had some injuries. Just disappointing rookie year. Last year, he still was injured a little bit, but he had 5 interceptions, a huge step up from his first year, and a year that the Texans surprised basically everybody. So again, I love that for them. They have since now signed like Danielle Hunter for D-line, which is a really good signing. You still have Jalen Petrie back there. You draft Kamari Lassiter, who I think is one of the more like steals of the draft potentially. So I'm very excited to see him in year 1, see what he can do. Again, I think the Texans are a great defense, and I'm excited to see how good they are this year because I'm very high on that team entering this season. But they're going A tier for defense. Next is the Chargers, and Chargers are gonna go C tier. Although I think, to be fair, the Chargers aren't really in like a win now spot anyway. Like, they just fired their head coach and really cleaned house, especially on offense. Got rid of a lot of their more iconic players like Keenan Allen, and Austin Eckler. So they're not really at a point to where you'd expect them to have big names everywhere or just a whole lot of talent at this point. I think it's just the start of the new era. You have Jim Harbaugh kind of seeing what he can actually work with. So my expectations for them in year one are not super high. You still have Joey Bosa. To be fair, he's been injured a lot, and I don't think he's been like as good as we know Joey Bosa can be. So I hope he can be back and healthy for a season. But Khalil Mack's actually been great, despite him being a bit older. He's been really, really good for them. So that was really cool to see. You still have Derwin James. Again, he's probably a bit on the older end now, or at least not playing at the level of play we're used to from him. But again, to be fair, every person in this roster has not played at the level that they should have been because of really poor coaching and things just not connecting well. So I'm not going to give up hope on them, but I do think, similar to Washington, like at a certain point, the lack of talent, it's got to catch up to you, so they're going to go C tier. Next is the Cardinals. The Cardinals are going to go D tier. I don't like doing that, but like, you don't have anybody. Like, you really don't have anybody. You have Budda Baker still there. You have Kaiser White. You have Zaven Collins. That's really about it, man. Like, there's a lot of holes in that Cardinals defense, and they are also in a rebuilding process, and it seems like their main priority was to make Kyler happy, protect Kyler, and give Kyler weapons. And you know what? I can't argue too much with that because you have a defensive-minded head coach coming from the Eagles. So I understand kind of putting your resources more into offense, giving Kyler the talent around him to really make plays, and then just kind of putting a Band-Aid over defense and addressing that later on. So it's going to be rough this year for this defense, but again, they're at kind of an early stage in their rebuild, so can't really blame them too much there. They're definitely D tier, and then the opposite of that is the Steelers, who are going S tier. The Steelers, same with the Ravens, I feel like always have such a really, really good defense. You have TJ Watt, of course. You have Joey Porter Jr. that is now in year 2, so I like that a lot for him. You also get Patrick Queen from the Ravens in free agency, which I think is a really good move. Minkah Fitzpatrick, of course, one of the best safeties in the entire NFL. So really, really good defense. They're going S tier. Next is the Bills. The Bills are going to go B tier. I don't think they're going to go A tier. The Bills have had a lot of changes over the past few years. Especially this past season on offense, losing both Diggs and Gabe Davis. Defensively, Tre'Davious White, after his injury, just really hasn't quite been the same, unfortunately. You have Matt Milano at one point. I don't think he's on the roster anymore either. I'm not going to lie. I lied. I had to check. He is still on the roster. Not sure why I thought he wasn't. But you have Rasul Douglas there in the secondary. Overall, though, like, Taylor Rapp's not terrible. I can't really get on board with the Bills as a whole this season because they have some holes to address, honestly. Like, you have guys at receiver, you're not used to really having to be the wide receiver one, including a rookie. So I think both the offense and defense this year for the Bills, they have some things to figure out. But despite that, there is still a lot of talent on that roster. So, again, they're going to go B tier. It could be worse for them, though. Next to the Cowboys, who are going to go S tier. Cowboys have a really, really good defense. You got Micah Parsons there. Stephon Gilmore is technically not signed anywhere, so you could re-sign him. Not sure how likely that is, but you have Deron Bland back there. Trevon Diggs will be back and healthy. Dexter Lawrence is still there, so really good defense. One of the best in the league. They're definitely S tier. And I've given my respect and props to the Patriots defense in the past. I'm going to continue to do so despite how bad the record may be, because this defense is just really, really good. And it reminds me sometimes of like the Panthers defense and the way that works. And just hear me out for a second before you go commenting anything about how they're so different, because I know they are. But what I mean by that is the Panthers and Patriots offenses are both terrible with like pretty good defenses. The Patriots is definitely better than the Panthers, but both defenses have to kind of carry that team sometimes. And you can just tell as the game goes on, the defense gets more and more tired because the offense can't do anything, which then eventually the defense cracks and they lose the game. And it's very similar between the two of how that goes, where it's like defenses make a great stand, they force some low-scoring games, and the offense just cannot capitalize. Hopefully this year is different for the Patriots. I guess we'll see as far as Drake May and how all that goes. But defensively, like, you have Matt Judon back and healthy. One of the players that I thought would be really good his rookie year, unfortunately got hurt, and that is Christian Gonzalez, who is now back and healthy, which is, I think, a very important factor for them. That defense is very, very good when they have everyone, on board and healthy and able to play. Last year, they were a bit depleted at times, despite just being not that good overall. But their defense, I think, when healthy, is really, really good. I love Christian Gonzalez being back. Marcus Jones is still there. Jabril Peppers is still there, and again, Matthew Judon as well. This is a really good defense when healthy. You have Gerard Mayo now as head coach. I want to see what he does with that defense. I think it should be really, really good. They're going A tier. Next is the Bears, and I think their secondary is actually pretty good. You have Jalen Johnson, who's an incredibly underrated corner. I like the Bears defense. The thing that holds me back a little bit is that defensive line, which I don't think is going to be too good. You do have Montez Sweat still there for what it's worth, who isn't bad, but I think overall that's probably your biggest weakness. You have like Tremaine Edmonds there at linebacker. You have Eric Gordon. No, Eric Gordon's a NBA player. You have Tyler Gordon, I think. Now I can't remember his name. It's whatever Gordon in the secondary, who's not bad. You have Jaquan Brisker as well. So you have some playmakers in this defense. I think will be pretty solid, but I think the defensive line will hold them back a little bit from going into like that A tier range, which again, I might move the Dolphins down. Next is the Rams. The Rams will also be going B tier, and they are going to have a huge loss with Aaron Donald, obviously, and it's pretty much next to impossible to draft someone or sign anyone that will replace that level of production because he's one of the best defensive players of all time. However, for what it's worth, they did actually prioritize that in the draft. They signed both Jared Verse and Braden Fiske, I think is how you say his last name. Frisky, it's one of those. Two teammates from Florida State for D-line that I think will make a pretty good impact in year one because they needed help there and they addressed it, immediately. So big props to them there. The Rams were a team I was not very high on at all going into last season, and they really, really proved me wrong. So I refuse to be tricked again this year. I think their defense will be pretty good. They're going to go B tier. Secondary might struggle at times, but again, that's kind of how I've ranked some of those teams in B tier. Like, they'll have their bad games. Overall, I think it's solid enough, though. And next is the Raiders. The Raiders are like, I'm going to put them, I think, B tier. And the reason why is because that team before Antonio Pierce took over and after is like two different teams. Even if their record didn't improve a ton and they didn't finish, with an amazing record, you could just feel the culture shift, and the players bought into it, and that's what really mattered because you could see on the field that they all bought into it. You have Jack Jones, who's a decent corner from New England. You have Max Crosby still, who's one of the better edge rushers in the entire NFL. You signed Christian Wilkins from the Dolphins, which is a really, really good free agency signing, like really, really good. So I like that a lot for them as well. I think, again, in the secondary, they could struggle a bit, but like, that defense, I think, is going to be really good. I believe they were, like, very high up in QB pressures after Pierce took over as well. I think they were, like, almost, I don't want to say last, but they were, like, far back there, and then he took over, and it just made a world of difference for them. So I'm going to put them B tier. I think they will, of course, have their bad games, but the Raiders' defense, I think, I don't think you should overlook them. They can compete. The Saints, however, and here's the thing, I've seen some of these, like, I'm going to be lower on the Saints. I'm going to say that right now. The rankings that I've seen, the things that I've read and watched and whatnot on the Saints defense, or just defense as a whole going into this year, I think people are a bit optimistic with the Saints defense because they signed, Chase Young, and you still have Cameron Jordan, but Cameron Jordan statistically has been pretty bad the past few years. And granted, in my video, I did say I don't see him having a year that bad again. Even at his age, he still is capable of being a decent defensive player. Last year was not a good year for him. Chase Young is, in my opinion, a pretty big question mark because you don't know what you're getting. You know how good he can be, but if he will be that good, that's kind of up in the air. Like, we're not really sure about that. At least in my opinion, I'm not sold yet. So that's definitely something to monitor, at least to me. Carl Granderson had a career year for them, so that's definitely worth noting. And then also something that I do like a lot for them, though, is Brian Bresee, who, as the year went on last year, began to really, really get better and better, pressure the QB a whole lot more. You could tell he was kind of taking that next step in the second half of the season. I think he'll be great for them this year. You still have Tyrann Mathieu, who's a good veteran player, helps out a lot. Paulson Adebo, who is one of the more underrated corners, that guy had a great year last year when Marshawn Lattimore was hurt. So, in my opinion, Marshawn Lattimore needs to prove he can stay healthy, because if not, Paulson Adebo might end up being, or Adebo, however you say it, might end up being one of the better defensive players in that entire defense for the Saints. So, again, overall, though, I think their cornerback room is really intriguing. I think the ceiling can actually be pretty high for them. I'm not sold the D-line. Tyrann Mathieu is a great safety. I'm putting the Saints D tier. I know that might be relatively low on them compared to a lot of things, but I'm just not sold. I need to see more from that defensive line and put them much higher. As for the Lions, I'm going to put them... we're just going to put them A tier. We might move them up to S tier. If you had them S tier, no need to argue. I agree. I can completely understand that. They're a great young defense. And they definitely have a case for S tier. You know, you have Aiden Hutchinson now going to year 3, who had an excellent year. Well, I mean, really year 1 as well, but especially year 2. Brian Branch was great as a rookie last year. Jack Campbell was great as a rookie last year. You now sign Terrion Arnold, or you draft Terrion Arnold in the draft, who was a day 1 starter in that secondary. I like it a lot for the Lions. I think they're going to be an awesome defense. I believe Cam Sutton, who I can't remember if he's on the Lions or the Steelers now or where he is, so this might be completely pointless information, but I'm just going to say it anyway. I think he just got suspended for performance-enhancing drugs, if I'm not mistaken. So if he's there, that's relevant information. If not, then write that down, I guess. Lions are going A tier. Next is the Broncos, and they will be joining the Cardinals in D tier. You know, it's weird doing that because the Broncos had like a fairly solid defense not that long ago. But, I mean, you get 70 dropped on you last season. Justin Simmons is now gone. You have Pat Surtain. New coaching's great. I think that, yes, that can be a huge change, like we saw with the Raiders. But like I've said for other teams, if the talent is not there, the talent's just not there. And there's definitely going to be a ceiling to that lack of talent on the field. Pat Surtain's amazing. It'd be cool if you re-signed Justin Simmons. That would definitely help you a lot. I can't remember who they signed. Was it Brandon Jones, I think, for safety and free agency? Other than that, I'm not a big believer in the Broncos defense this year. They're going D tier. Next is the Eagles. I see a little bit of a bounce back here for them, both on offense and defense. I think the coaching last year was absolutely abysmal. To go back and watch their Super Bowl year against the Chiefs on offense and defense, and then go to last year, I mean, it looks so discombobulated. Like, people don't know what they're doing. Terrible play calling. Like, on 3rd and 10, you're running QB draws. You got A.J. Brown. You got Devontae Smith. Like, what are you doing, man? Like, air the ball out. I don't understand that. I didn't like Brian Johnson very much last year for them. You get Kellen Moore there now. I think that's going to be a big difference. I can't remember who they brought in for defensive coordinator. I think it was from the Dolphins, and I cannot remember his name, which can really bother me. I think it's Fangio, I think, you brought in. And then also in the draft, you get Quinion Mitchell, you get Cooper DeJean, 2 great prospects for secondary. So 2 big signings there. I like that a lot for the Eagles. You still have Jalen Carter now going to year 2, who had an amazing rookie year. I like the Eagles defense. I think they bounced back a bit from last year. Last year, they were more of a C or B tier defense. I think they go A tier this year. I think they have a bounce back year, more respectable. I have them there, and I have the 49ers S tier. I mean, they're just an amazing defense. Like, there's nothing more to really say about them, I don't think. Like, you got Fred Warner, you got Nick Bosa. Super Bowl year last year, they were really, really good. Came very close to being the Chiefs in overtime. So, yeah, one of the better defenses in the entire NFL. They're definitely S tier. The Packers, I keep going back and forth on. So, any Packers fans, comment down below what your honest opinions of this defense is, because last year for a while they were pretty terrible, and then toward the end of the year they stepped it up a little bit and they looked a lot better, especially in the playoffs. You still have Quay Walker there, which is definitely interesting. You still have, or not still there, he's young. I'm not sure why I said it like that. But you do actually still have Jair Alexander. You bring in Xavier McKinney, which is a huge signing in my opinion. I cannot remember the name of the safety you drafted, but you have him as well now in the secondary. You needed safety depth a lot. You addressed it. I like the Packers defense. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and give them B tier. I think some people might be lower and say like C tier, but I think that the added depth in the secondary make a huge difference for them. I'm giving them B tier. Next is the Jets. They're going S tier. Amazing D-line with Quinnen Williams there. You still have Sauce Gardner there in the secondary. Just, really, really good all around. I'm forgetting a big name on that defense, and I'm not even going to look it up because I just want to be embarrassed not being able to remember it. But, yeah, they're definitely S tier. Really, really good defense. Next is the Panthers, and again, like I've said 1,000 times, I always like try my very best to push my bias out of the way whenever I do these rankings. And the Panthers, I think there's a lot to like about their defense, especially their defensive coordinator. I think Evero is awesome. I think he did a great job last year with not a lot. When you lose guys like J.C. Horn for the year and Shaq Thompson for the year, real leaders of the defense, you lose. And you still are able to kind of compete with like Troy Hill out there at corner. So I have a lot of respect for him. I think it starts and ends with the player's health, which may sound a little obvious, but like especially for the Panthers, it's been a huge issue on defense the past couple seasons, especially for J.C. Horn. Derrick Brown, incredible, most tackles ever for defensive tackle last season. So great season from him. Is it enough to be in B tier? I don't really know. I'm gonna put him C tier just because I'm not entirely sold on just the amount of guys. Like, I know it sounds dumb, but like you got big names kind of with like J.C. Horn. You know, he's awesome when he's healthy, but will he be healthy? You got Shaq Thompson. He's great. He'll, I mean, for the most part, be healthy. I think. I hope. Derrick Brown's back there, but other than that, there's a good drop off. You signed Jordan Fuller, which I think is a great pick for safety there, but I'm not blown away elsewhere. I think a lot is going to rely on the defensive scheme for them to compete again, which I think is entirely possible. I will say, if they do sign Stephon Gilmore, it'll be pretty interesting. I think Gilmore still has a lot of, not a lot. He still has some good years left. They would need that piece there. You have Clowney for what it's worth, but I don't know. They're a low B, high C tier team for me. Next is the Chiefs. This is really tough because they could go either way. I'll just put them A tier. We might move them up, we might not. I mean, there's a lot of teams that could go either way for me. Like, if you had the Lions, the Chiefs, or maybe even the Texans in S tier, I wouldn't really blame you there. I think it's perfectly valid. The Chiefs, though, they were honestly a strength of that team. When the offense struggled last year, the defense, they really kept them in games with Chris Jones and Trent McDuffie. L'Jarius Sneed had a great year last year as well. I mean, it was a great Chiefs defense. Next is the Titans. They're going to go C tier. I don't think they're bad enough to be in D tier. When you sign guys like L'Jarius Sneed, which is, again, a big signing for them. I like it a lot. You still have Jeffrey Simmons there. Harold Landry's still there. You got some playmakers. Again, I think the lack of talent will catch up to you at some point. But it keeps you at a D tier at least. They're going to go C tier. Falcons are going to go A tier. This is a really good defense. Last year, you could really see the growth when you added like Jesse Bates. You added Calais Campbell for defensive line, kind of give you some depth there, and honestly a good veteran starter. So now you still have AJ Terrell. I think Campbell's gone, but you still have Jesse Bates. You could have got a great edge rusher at 8, but you take Michael Penix Jr. for no reason. I don't understand that. I will never understand that. They're going to go A tier. Still a great defense, but again, it could have been a little bit better in my opinion. Next is the Giants. Now, this is a really tough team for me, and it's kind of weird because if you're looking at the entire defense, it's not great. If you look at their D-line, though, I mean, they could have an incredible D-line. Like, you have Brian Burns now, who you got from the Panthers, who's a great player. You have Dexter Lawrence, who is one, if not the best defensive tackle in the entire NFL. You have Kayvon Thibodeau, which in my opinion is still a little early to give up on him. He's been pretty good. So you could have a really good defensive line. Secondary, it's like, you got Deonte Banks. I think you drafted Drew Phillips. You draft Tyler Nubin for safety. That's probably pretty good. But you lose Xavier McKinney. Like, really fragile secondary, in my opinion. So, because of that, they're probably going to go C tier for me. I might move them up to B tier in a second here, but I don't know if they're going to make that jump. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Vikings are next. Vikings are going to go B tier. They have a solid defense. Not a whole lot more than that, in my opinion. You have Byron Murphy still there. You draft Dallas Turner. I think that was a steal for where they got him. He could have gone top 10. I wouldn't have been too shocked about that, at least in my opinion. So the Vikings defense, I think, is really, really good. So I have Harrison Smith there, the veteran, of course. Kyrie Jackson, unfortunately, it's honestly shocking to me because, like, I was planning this video for a while, and he was, like, one of the younger rookies I wanted to talk about across the entire NFL that could, like, really make a huge impact in year one for being, like, kind of underrated. Cannot believe he passed away. Absolutely terrible. Apart from that, and on a lighter note, I do think the Vikings defense will be pretty decent this year. I know a big focus is on JJ McCarthy, which, like, it is fair. The quarterback's a very important position, I'd say. Probably a hot take. I get that being a huge focus, but this defense can be really good, man. You lose Neil Hunter, but you still go and get Jonathan Greenard from the Texans, who had a great year for them last year. So, really good move. they're going to go B tier. I don't think a lot more than that will be expected from them. So they're just going to go there. And the Browns are going to throw an S tier. Browns are arguably one of the best defenses in the entire NFL. And what's crazy to me, too, is 3 of the 4 teams from the AFC North are in S tier for defense. Maybe my rankings are inaccurate, but it's like, I don't know what team you're moving down from S tier among the Ravens, Steelers, and Browns, at least in my opinion. And if you're moving any of them down, I don't think you can move them down lower than A. So yeah, Browns, they're gonna go they're gonna go S tier. Myles Garrett's still there. You got Greg Newsome and the other guy, I can never remember his name for some reason. Again, I'm gonna let myself be embarrassed. It's the other corner, and I can't remember what his name is now, which is gonna really annoy me. But yeah, so Browns, really good defense. They're going S tier. Looking at this, you could probably do a lot of things. I'm not going to lie. You could probably move the Lions up and maybe even the Jets down if you wanted to. You can move maybe even the Eagles or Chiefs up. And anybody else down. You could also probably put the Bengals up and move the Dolphins down. You could also probably move maybe even the Bills up and move somebody else down. I'm going to leave it at this. I'm not sure. I mean, again, I'm sure I got some teams wrong. I'm sure you guys disagree on some. Comment down below who you think. But again, this I think is a relatively accurate look at the teams. I'm not going to lie. I don't think it's a perfect ranking, but some teams will probably surprise. Some will probably, disappoint. But I think the S tier is pretty set, though, at least in my opinion. So let me know down below any changes you'd make to the list. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. I would really appreciate that, and leave a like. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.